on which spiritual organizations delivered as promised. Don't you suppose that the first statistic listed under each organization would be the success ratio? Like, here are 100 randomly selected people who started with the organization 5 years ago, and here's where they are today. For instance, 31 have moved up in the organization, 27 have moved on, 39 are still with it, but not deeply committed, and 3 have entered abiding, non-dual awareness. Okay, 3%. That's a number you can compare. But this organization of yours would have a big, fat goose egg, wouldn't they? And not just out of 100, but out of hundreds of thousands, millions probably. Am I wrong? You're making it sound, I know I am, Martin, and I know how they respond to this point. They say that everyone is coming up together, don't they? They say everyone's going to burst through at the same time when a certain critical mass has been reached. Isn't that it? Well, kind of, yeah. But you're making it sound, why do you think that organization isn't up to its ass in enlightened people after 30 years? I would think they'd have storage problems by now. I would think the world would be beating a path to their doors by now. How much time do they need? It's not exactly, yes, Martin, it is exactly. That's the point. It couldn't be more exact. How is it possible that after 30 years the only case of enlightenment is the one that started the whole thing? I know he's a big deal, Martin. I know the teachings. I know the breadth and scope of this guy. I agree that he's an elevated being, whatever that means. If I were in his presence, I would fall to my knees and touch his lotus-strewn feet. He's great. I know it. But we're not talking about someone else. We're talking about you. We're talking about you doing what? What did you call it? Breaking free from bondage? I don't see anyone in this guy's organization breaking free from bondage, Martin. Do you? I wait. Nothing. Can you offer an opinion as to why this might be? Martin is silent. He is clearly battling a lot of internal stuff. He looks at me to see what's coming next. Martin, I think you might consider the possibility that there's a serious flaw in that organization, something near the core. Do you think it's unreasonable of me to say that? No reaction. Do you think it's at least reasonable to ask? To at least consider the possibility? He nods almost imperceptibly. My own awakening ran its course in less than 2 years, Martin. And that's without any living teacher to help me. I've never heard of the process taking longer than that. I really don't see how the process could take much longer than that. When I say this, I don't mean that it only takes 2 years from the first spark of spiritual longing. I mean 2 years after the point when the process of awakening actually begins, the primary epiphany, the first step. Let's capitalize that, the first step. I know that many people spend many years in meditation and spiritual practice without achieving full awakening. And I know that they think it's because they haven't crossed the finish line yet, but it's actually because they haven't crossed the starting line yet, the first step. I continue. It's a process, and it takes a certain amount of time, about the same as the gestation period for a baby elephant. Martin is too polite to ask the obvious question. How many cases of enlightenment could I take credit for? The answer is an average of 1 or 2 a year since I began teaching, a dozen or so total. I can't really take credit for them, of course, but it was to me that the universe guided them at critical stages in their journeys. A couple of them are trying their hands at writing or speaking now, but most are just getting the hang of it. I can see 2 students in the pipeline at the moment who are going to make it. who have taken the first step. Once the first step is taken, the rest of the journey is sure to follow, unless you die or sustain a massive head wound. Martin. Yes? Would you agree that there might be a flaw in a teaching that doesn't produce any graduates? Right? He hesitates, then nods. If so, it would be a pretty serious flaw, huh? He nods. I nod. Well, that's an interesting possibility. Maybe you could think about that a bit and let me know what you come up with. Okay? He nods. Martin? He nods. I already know the answer. This is for you. Okay? He nods. Allegiance to any spiritual teaching or teacher, any outside authority, is the most treacherous beast in the jungle. The first thing we want to do when we begin our journey is find the companionship and validity that comes with an established group, and in so doing we effectively end the journey before it begins. Martin is a perfect example of this, and perfectly typical. He set out 20 years ago in search of something higher, and now he's forced to confront the fact that all the effort and all the heart he's poured into his search for all those years has not carried him a single step forward. 20 years he spent digging himself into a hole, and now he has to climb out and begin the journey, which he'll almost certainly not do. The power of our devotion to teachers and teachings is not a reflection of their value, but of the ego's will to survive. It's ego, the false self, that exalts the guru and declares the teaching sacred. But nothing is exalted or sacred, only true or not true. Anyone familiar with the process of deprogramming someone who has been brainwashed by a cult will be able to appreciate what's really involved in breaking free of this kind of allegiance. But there's really only one real cult, the cult of false self, and everyone is a fanatically devoted member. Awakening is the process of deprogramming. Enlightenment is the unprogrammed state. I explain all this in gentle terms to Martin, appealing to his mind, his reason, and watching his discomfort as heart and mind struggle against each other. In my preferred version of the Mahabharata, Krishna and Arjuna are discussing the war that is soon to begin. Arjuna asks if the war will take place on the battlefield or in his heart. I don't see a real difference, replies Krishna. I don't want Martin to think I'm picking on his group and guru in particular. I don't see any reason to distinguish between one and another. There are any number of reasons why a spiritual organization might not be pumping out the enlightened in droves, not all of them readily visible. One very good reason is that, unbeknownst even to themselves, the members of any spiritual organization may be quite satisfied to simply pursue enlightenment. Dedicating one's life to lofty spiritual ideals is every bit as life-defining and purpose-giving as the quest for heaven, or power, or money, or love. Just because there's a flashing neon sign above the door that says, "Free enlightenment, the shortest and easiest way, the one true path," doesn't mean that what goes on inside is really about enlightenment, or that the people who go in really want it. Quite the opposite. In nearly all cases, the enlightenment being bought and sold is not truth realization at all, but a state of consciousness so crazy-ass wonderful that you'd have to be an idiot not to want it. So insidiously wonderful, in fact, that its radiance has blinded untold millions of seekers to the fact that it doesn't exist. So maybe Martin's former organization is more into the talk than the walk, but I don't believe that they're perpetrating any sort of intentional fraud. I think they're just as convinced as those they convince. In these cases, it's not likely to be anything sinister, so much as an organization behaving like an organism that seeks to survive, adapt, and grow. Maybe the organism seeks liberation for all beings, or world peace, or the expansion of its own doctrine, or simply its own exaltation and empowerment. Maybe the enlightened guy at the top just wants to get laid, or maybe he lost control of the organization to the unenlightened guys below. Or maybe the enlightened guy at the top isn't enlightened at all, but something else, something truly wonderful perhaps, but not awake, not truth realized. Or, hey, who knows? Maybe Martin's former group will reach their critical mass and they'll all burst into permanent, super happy consciousness together. Boy, will I have egg on my face when I'm knocking on their door asking if it's too late to sign up. The point is that there's really no point in trying to figure out all the possible reasons why seekers don't find. It's just another distraction, and there's no shortage of those. The point is to wake up, not to earn a PhD in waking up. Simply put, as Sarah surmised, waking up is job one. And then, if you still want to liberate all beings or promote world peace or save the whales, great. Lucky beings, lucky world, lucky whales. But the bottom line remains the same. You're either awake or you're not. Chapter 4. Placid and self-contained. I think I could turn and live with animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. They do not lie awake in the dark and weep for their sins. They do not make me sick discussing their duty to God. Not one is dissatisfied. Not one is demented with the mania of owning things. Not one kneels to another, nor to his kind that lived thousands of years ago. Not one is respectable or unhappy over the whole earth. Walt Whitman. Chapter 5. Done. Long enough have you dreamed contemptible dreams. Now I wash the gum from your eyes. You must habit yourself to the dazzle of the light and of every moment of your life. Long have you timidly waited, holding a plank by the shore. Now I will you to be a bold swimmer, to jump off in the midst of the sea, rise again, nod to me, shout, and laughingly dash with your hair. I am the teacher of athletes. He that by me spreads a wider breast than my own proves the width of my own. He most honors my style who learns under it to destroy the teacher. Walt Whitman. The most recent visitor to the house to accomplish full awakening was Paul. For the last 2 weeks he was here, I didn't speak to him at all. I only saw him occasionally as he went off for walks or while he sat on one of the garden benches amid the blowing snow. That doesn't mean that's all he did. That's just all I know about. I don't go down and hang out with the guests much, and I'm sure that far more goes on in this house than I'll ever know about. I would guess, however, that Paul wasn't doing a lot of socializing during this period. It was winter when he told me. A crisp night, but not frigid. Fresh snow on the ground. One of those nights that all the stars came out for, in a crystalline vision that awed the wind to stillness. A night so clear and silent that it felt staged. A perfect winter